It's been so exciting and such a privilege to witness Atlantic salmon spawning at such close quarters that even if I hadn't managed to film it, it would have been memorable. With the moments that I've captured as well, I've got to admit, you know, they are pretty special.
I'm Matt Hayes. Among other things, I help to run a fishing lodge on one of the finest Atlantic salmon rivers in the world. I get to spend a lot of time with salmon, fishing for them sure, but mostly helping other people, our fly fishing guests, to catch the fish or simply to talk about salmon and salmon fishing endlessly. Yet I'd never seen salmon actually spawning, a sight which, according to my friend and renowned salmon scientist Ava Thorstad, is an omission I needed to put right.
So they are born in the rivers, they have these long distance migrations into the ocean to feed, and then they return to the rivers for spawning again. And that's the most fascinating thing with their whole life cycle, their ability to home to their home river. They migrate thousands of kilometers, but still they find their way back. So salmon born in Gaula will return to Gaula, and they will even maybe return to the same area. So a salmon born like out here might return to this area of the river for its own spawning.
I desperately wanted to avoid the worst of the winter weather. It comes early sometimes. The Gaula Valley in the depths of winter is a beautiful place, but freezing and flooding were what I feared the most. Freezing was a particular concern, because as we approached the spawning time, the air temperature kept dropping. And as luck would have it, although it didn't freeze over completely during my filming, it did just 2 days after I finished.
Well, I've been out here filming now for probably about 2 hours, and I've hardly got a shot actually, and they're all quite a long way in the distance. It's a lot trickier than you'd think it would be. For a start off, the water's absolutely perishing. It's really cold, and the fish are quite erratic in where they appear.
My early attempts at filming the fish were frustrating. The salmon, though always close, were never quite close enough. But then the weather intervened, first in the form of heavy rain bringing heavily tinted water to the river, and just when it started to fall, it snowed.
If you've ever wondered how a river freezes up, this is how it's done. It's the end of October now here in Norway on the Gaula. It's not even November yet, but look, this has happened overnight. We've now got almost slabs of ice, a little bit like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, starting to form out here and glue themselves together. In the beginning, I watched the fish basically staking out their turf. A lot of the male fish were kind of facing off against each other. The fish were zooming around this area at high speed, chasing each other. But then we got to a phase where they began to pair up, and one pair of salmon in particular, who I'll call Björn and Hilda, paired up in front of me here, and I've spent quite a lot of time watching them. They couldn't be more different. Hilda's very feminine, typical graceful lines. She's a typical size Gaula salmon, probably around 16 to 18 pounds, and she's got the graceful lines of a henfish. Her flanks have become quite scarred recently due to the fact that she's been rubbing against the gravel, preparing it and cutting what's called a red, ready for the spawning process. Now Björn, he's a character that you're instantly aware of when he cruises into the area. I've watched him swimming around out there, and he's definitely the cock of the walk. When he comes in towards the camera, he usually shows off with a bit of a flourish, but he's a very deep fish, a big, strong, powerful male salmon, certainly north of 25 pounds, maybe north of 30, and he's displaying those typical beautiful red, bright spawning colours that fish have when they're going through this process.
I was beginning to find out more about the salmon dating game, and I was becoming increasingly curious about how it might turn out for Björn and Hilda, my favourite salmon couple. I had to wait a further 2 days before the river began to settle down again and filming could resume. In the meantime, I wondered, could it be possible that some salmon might meet on the spawning shallows more than once?
Salmon would stay in the sea for normally 1 to 3 years. After 1 year, those returning after 1 year would normally be between 1 and 3 kilos. If they stay for 2 years, they would be 3 to 7 kilos, or they could be larger if they stay 3 years or longer. So they could stay at sea for 3, 4, 5 years. They could also survive spawning and then go to the sea again and then come back for a new spawning. So we know that some salmon can spawn 5 or 6 times during their lifetime. But then you really need good genes and you need to be a lucky salmon. So most salmon will survive for 1 spawning and quite a lot will spawn 2 times during their life.
Day 9 dawned dull and overcast, but an inspection of the river revealed rapidly clearing water and, much to my delight and relief, Björn and Hilda.
I've come down today, the fish are back in position, the water looks a bit clearer, so I'm really hoping that the story will continue and I can get some great footage.
At times, I felt a little voyeuristic, intrusive even, as I watched the salmon move from courtship to foreplay, and in the case of the males, quite a lot of aggression in between. Day 10, and I was beginning to wonder whether the salmon would ever get it on. I had no idea when the actual spawning would take place, and indeed for how long it would last.
But it's been an up and down game. I've watched the sort of preliminary spawning where I've seen Hilda cutting the red, but I'm really not quite sure whether she's laid any eggs in it yet. I suspect not.
The water had coloured overnight, making visibility difficult, and I had problems spotting the fish. Björn and Hilda fulfilled their destiny in the space of a hectic half an hour. They were joined by a much smaller third male fish that darted in at the last minute to complete a salmon ménage à trois.
Well, talk about after the Lord Mayor's show. Yesterday was absolutely amazing, a day I'll never forget. You know, yesterday morning there were groups of salmon, male and female, out here in this water in front of me, still chasing each other in the courtship ritual. You know, all of that took place, as far as I could see, certainly within an hour. And you can see the results the next day. Just nothing here, and it kind of feels a little bit flat and empty.
Seeing a natural miracle unfold before my eyes was one of the best experiences of my life. I am in awe of the Atlantic salmon, more than I ever was in fact. I realise that whilst these fish are being driven by a genetic imprint to propagate the species no matter what, they form bonds, pursue rivalries and even develop relationships. Driven to fulfil a bittersweet destiny that, according to Eva, is most likely to be a one-time deal, The sad thing is that for most salmon, the heady climax of spawning is a prelude to death. Yet, as I turned to make for home, a little piece of me clung to the hope that when I visit the spawning shallows again next autumn, I might just see Björn and Hilda cozying up to each other in their usual spot.